Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. I'm Pam Laricchia, longtime unschooling mom and author. Join me and my wonderful guests for interviews, information, and inspiration about unschooling and living joyfully with your family. You can find the episode show notes, your free introductory ebook, What is Unschooling, and lots more information at livingjoyfully.ca. And here's the show. Hello, everyone. I'm Pam Laricchia, and this is episode number 93 of the podcast. It's the 12th of October, 2017, as I record this intro. My guest this week is Robert Gottlieb. Robert's an unschooling dad with two children, ages 11 and 19. We have a great conversation, diving into his family's journey to unschooling, going against societal expectations, stretching comfort zones, what advice he'd like to share with dads just starting out, and much more. As an update this week, I'm so happy to say I've gotten through all my edits and have sent my unschooling journey manuscript back to my editor for a final pass. For me, it's so much fun to work through her comments. She lets me know when I've gotten off track or haven't explained myself well enough. It's challenging, like in the most invigorating way. And of course, there's the grammar she cleans up for me. And by the end, you guys definitely get a better book. Also, just to let you know, I'm taking the next couple of weeks off. There will definitely be episodes as usual. I've got them all ready to go, and I'm really excited about them. They'll just have super short intros because I'm pre-recording those. And I'll give you a nice update when I return. I would love to say a huge thank you to everyone who has chosen to support the show on Patreon. I deeply appreciate all my patrons. You guys inspire me, and I love that you're helping me share unschooling information with anyone who wants to explore ways to live this wonderful lifestyle with their family. And if you'd like to support the show, even for as little as $1 a month, check out the Exploring Unschooling page at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/exploring unschooling. And this week, I want to share a quote from the interview. Robert said, "My overall goal is peace in the world. That's something that I really care about. And I believe that by giving our kids this ability to live life as human beings and not being told what to do, they are more likely to be peaceful than not later on in life. They're more likely to be more empathetic." I really do think the ripples of our unschooling lives make their way out into the world. That with the choice we're making at home to live with our children as fellow human beings, we're inviting change on a larger scale. Our children gain so much experience in being in relationship with other people, and they take that experience with them into the world. It's beautiful. And now, on to the interview with Robert. Hi, everyone. I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Robert Gottlieb. Hi, Robert.
Hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
Yay. Robert and his wife are unschooling their two children. I first came across Robert online in unschooling circles, actually, and I thought it would be really fun to chat with him about his experiences so far. And to get us started, can you share with us a bit about you and your family?
Sure. As you mentioned, it's my wife and my two kids. My daughter is 11, my son is 19, and they've had a history of living all over the United States, mostly on the coasts. And so they've traveled a little bit. We have 4 cats and a hamster. And my daughter loves to foster kittens, which we're doing right now. So it's a very cat-friendly and pet-friendly environment here. We like to joke around a lot. We have a lot of fun together, just talking. We don't have to be doing anything. They both are very well versed in where things are in the world now because they've talked online so much. But I'll get to a little bit of that later. But it's a very open and fun family to be in.
Oh, that sounds lovely. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear what your kids are enjoying at the moment, because it's always fun to hear what unschooling kids are getting into. So is there anything in particular that they're interested in?
my daughter is heavily into Minecraft, which is a common theme in Unschooling, which is great because there's so much creativity on there. And in particular, she likes role playing on Minecraft, which I found very interesting. Yeah. It's you would think, I mean, she'd like the building part too, and then all the different games that they have and stuff like that. But there's a part where the kids just type to each other and pretend to be different characters. And it allows them to play out all kinds of scenarios that you can't do in real life. And I looked at this and I'm like, wow, that would be great if I had had that when I was a kid. But, it's basically taking what's in your mind, but sharing it with other kids so you have more, richness to the environment of what you're looking at. It was just mind blowing. So that's one thing. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, my son Joseph has done some role playing stuff too, and we've talked about it, and it is really fascinating, isn't it? Because they I guess I was going to say take it seriously. Like they get into the role and they really put their head into another person, really, right? And to see how they think through it, how they take over that personality for a while is really fascinating, isn't it?
And then all the intricacies too, because them thinking of a name of the character. They have characteristics of these characters that are like how many tails it has and what race it is, and there's a whole like website where they have these descriptions. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
So there's that, and then she plays League of Legends, which she just got into the past couple months. So she's online a lot, but she also is in the Girl Scouts. She enjoys being with people. She's very much a social butterfly. She also likes to draw and play on her computer in general or iPad. So, I mean, she's doing a lot.
Yeah.
My son, my 19-year-old has gotten to a point in his life where he's very introspective. He's looking at things like meditation, philosophy, and, really how societies work or don't work in many cases. He also likes to game. He plays an online game. It's based around Arma 2. He's on a PC, so he's got different games. But watching him play those games, the thing that really got, I noticed this early on. I can't remember what age he started playing, but the things that happen in the games are very intricate. When you look at these military style shoot 'em up games, everyone thinks, oh, they're just blowing stuff up and it's indiscriminate and all that. No, it's not. It's actually very split-second oriented stuff. And if you're not fast, you will die. Mm-hmm. And, it's very quick thinking. It's teamwork. It's, all these different skills that people don't see when they say, oh, they're just playing video games. They're not just playing video games. They're learning a huge amount about skills that, by the way, are very useful in the real world. So I'm very interested to see later on in life how he uses them, whether for a hobby or for a career or whatever. Just I know that these things will come into play later on.
And don't they come into play too? Like, because you were talking about his interest in philosophy and how he's introspective right now. I find that too. Like my two sons have both. Like my youngest is 20 now, and he's very into philosophy, and he's reading a lot, and we're having really interesting conversations. And I found the same with my eldest, and so much of our philosophical discussions, he can connect and relate them to the games and stuff that he's playing, and even the people that he's playing with, and like the whole world kind of meshes all together, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. All those things come into play right away. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I find that it's fascinating to have conversations with them. And the other piece that's so interesting is that, my younger son games as well, but he also listens to a lot of audiobooks and stuff. And my older son, actually, he watches a lot. He takes in the same kind of information, but through videos on YouTube and everything. He's never been a huge reader. Although he reads a lot of stuff online. But the fascinating thing is it's all about the ideas, right? So no matter where they're coming from, at the root, they're all talking and considering and contemplating those same kinds of foundational human being living in society kind of ideas.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing I was going to say. Yeah, with my son, I definitely have these fascinating conversations about things, whether it's current events or just things happening in the world. And the other thing is, he tends to be very worldly in general. He's aware of more than just the United States, and it's great to see that, because I really want my kids to always be aware of the world around them rather than focusing only on where they're living. And, it's an important aspect of being human to me anyway.
Yeah, it was something I hadn't, thought about before, but through just seeing my children in action, it's become a really important and valuable piece of our lives. So that is very interesting. Next question. How did you discover unschooling, and what did your family's transition to unschooling look like?
Well, we actually discovered it a few times. The first time we were living back in San Diego, and there was this homeschooling group that we were part of. And there was this one family, the one unschooling family. This, I can't remember how many years ago this was, but there was that one family, that odd family, right? And, odd to me at the time anyway. And so we met them. They said, "Oh yeah, you can do this." And my wife and I are like, "No, we can't. This is crazy. What are you kidding?" The standard response, right? And so we didn't do anything then. We just heard about it and, saw someone doing it and saw one family. So we really didn't even have a good representative example. So anyway, we moved to Charleston, South Carolina some years later. Well, actually, before we even did that, my son had gone through public school, charter school, homeschooling, all in San Diego. And then we got here into Charleston, and he did some Montessori school. And the Montessori, which we thought would be great, right? It was him basically sitting there doing nothing. And we're paying a lot of money for this. Mm-hmm. And we're scratching our heads like, no, this isn't a good idea. It's just, and again, we had some end game in mind of him, being enticed to learn, or, something forcing him to learn, which was, as we learned later, not what was going to work. He went from Montessori to charter and then back to homeschooling again. And in all of that, we thought charter, oh, great, right? No, it wasn't great. It was just, the same bad parts of school that we don't like, and, with some other things thrown in. And he did really well, quote unquote, like the third best reader in the school, and this, that, and the other. And it's like, as soon as he got out of the charter school and into homeschooling even, he stopped reading. Mm-hmm. He's like, okay, I'm done. I've checked off that box. And that kind of made me sad, because I really wanted reading to be a part of his life, Fortunately, that would come many years later. But so, we saw that. And then, homeschooling, even charter schooling and homeschooling, we both were, struggling with him, to get him to do his homework and to get him to do work at all. And it was just really straining our relationship. And it was like, okay, why are we doing this? So I started researching alternatives. I came across somebody that was parroting everything Sandra was saying, and finally found my way to Sandra herself. And, in terms of reading her site and really that's where things started clicking for me. It's like, now I get this. Now I'm going to understand what that person back in San Diego was doing. And, there's unfortunately so much bad information about unschooling out there. And I had to wade through all of it. And eventually I got to the stuff that works. And, that what finally clicked for me was, just I want a good relationship with my kids. I don't want to be butting heads with them all the time. And this is a way to do that. And it doesn't mean that I have to give up every single thing I believe in. It just means I actually talk to them like a human being, like I would my wife, or a friend, or, whatever. Then, when you do that, it opens up the relationship so much more, and they're willing to talk to you and listen to you. And that doesn't mean that it turns out perfect, or they do everything you want them to do. That's not the point. But the point is, you hear them, they hear you. So that's kind of where I started coming in. So now my wife had to be convinced, although not very, it didn't take very much to convince her, at least on the academic side of things. That was pretty straightforward to her. It was more just the whole life unschooling, where it's like, okay, we don't really need to restrict every single thing about their lives. And, just kind of imagine me restricting my wife, it's like, that's what it would be like for them. And it just didn't make any sense. So we let go of a bunch of things. Now, the problem with me is I tend to fire hose when I'm excited about something and I learn something. I'm like, I get this. And I believe everybody should get it. And so I don't suggest doing what I did at the very beginning, which was just, okay, kids, have at it. It's like, that's not probably the best way to to go because they've had these rules all of a sudden lifted, and it's like, okay, what do I do now? It's like, so, depending on your kid, you've got to know your kid and figure out what works best for them. But a little bit at a time is what I needed to have done, and also would have made it easier on my wife as well. But hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah. Oh, there are so many great points in there, Robert. I mean, that one is wonderful, like knowing your kids as you're getting started, because you're right. It can be like pulling the rug out from under them if there's such a huge shift all at once, right? Kind of like they're left out at sea trying to figure out this whole new world rather than figuring it out piece by piece by piece.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I smiled when you were talking about your son coming home and reading, as in not wanting to read. I went through the same thing with my daughter. I mean, she was 7 when she left school, but reading had been a thing at school, right? With the reading groups, and it's pushed so hard that when she came home, she didn't want to go anywhere near a book. And it's like, nope, I can't read, don't want to read, never want to learn to read, nothing. And that was it. And actually, I'll share a link in the show notes to a blog post I wrote about it. But it's true. It took about a year for her to just kind of work through all that ick that was built up in her, right? Just around that one skill. And I know it's amazing. It's amazing how we can affect people so easily with their best interests at heart, right? It's not like we're trying to damage them or injure them. We're trying to help them. Yet when we start trying to force our schedule and our expectations on them, wow, it has such a huge effect, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean that definitely. I saw that all over the place, all different skill sets, everything you can imagine. And my daughter, who's never been to school, she's 11, and you can see it in her. The opposite effect, where she just out of blue will ask me for math problems.
Yeah,
she doesn't need to. She does. It's just fun for her. It's just something that she likes figuring out. And there's all these different things she'll ask me along the way. And the key is, I see a lot of parents fall into the trap of, they're asking questions about a specific skill. They're going to go all the way with this. It's like, no, they might only inches with this, which is fine. They're going to dabble in a bunch of different things. And how else do you find out what you like until you've tried it? And maybe you want to try many different things. She's 11. She doesn't need to know what she wants to do. She's got plenty of time. This is the perfect time for her to try little bits and pieces of everything at a time that she wants to.
Oh, you're right. I think that's a huge deschooling shift, to be okay with them trying something out and quitting, right? To be able to just taste this and taste this and taste this. And then if you can, live with that for a while, very often, and it's always looking back, right? You talked earlier about how hindsight is 2020. You in that moment when they're choosing to try something and part of you maybe starts getting excited for them, like that's a clue for yourself that you're starting to make it about you and not about them.
Right.
And when they quit, you can't know looking forward, right? So that is where the trust piece comes in. But once you have a few months and then a few years and you look back, that's when you can really see the connections and what seemed like totally unrelated things that they tried out, like over 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever. When you look back, you can see in the root of those things what it really was that they were interested in, can't you?
Right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Unschooling is definitely unconventional. And I was wondering if you talked a little bit about your transition, if there were any particular societal expectations that you found it hard to work through, and how did you go about doing that?
Well, you see, the way that I dealt with that, I mean, yes, there were definitely naysayers all the way along, and, including my own parents at times, and, and the in-laws, and, the standard, concerns. Are we spoiling them, or, just letting them do anything they want? We did things early on. I think we sort of prepared our families a little bit by attachment parenting with both of our kids. So they both co-slept, they both breastfed until they decided not to, and things like that. And so, it was kind of a natural lead-in for a lot of what we were doing. So our parents were kind of primed for expecting the unexpected in a lot of it. So that helped. And it's not just our parents, of course, it's, society as well that we're dealing with. And again, in the attachments parenting side of things, my wife was very adamant about, look, this is the way I'm going to do things. If you don't like it, society, that's your problem. So then that's kind of, eventually you get there. I know at the beginning, as far as unschooling goes, it's not like you immediately have that ability to just, everything, I'll just tell them off, and that's probably not the best way to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. But the way that I do it, or did it, especially early on, was I had a certain confidence at the very beginning, and I know not everybody's going to have that right away. And it just, like I said about the fire hose, I'm passionate about this. I know this is what I want to do. So in my mind, it's a done deal. And if someone else doesn't agree with it, it's like, well, I like chocolate, you like vanilla, whatever. That's kind of how I handled it. I didn't take it personally. And even though people might have wanted me to, it just never happened that way. So, basically what I tried to do, though, and it didn't always come out right. And again, I was fire hosing, so a lot of these people probably didn't get it. But I was more in terms of looking at educating them. What if I'm them? Unfortunately, I didn't do the standard thing of, putting myself in the other person's shoes, which I looking back, I would have rather done that, because who knows, I might have been able to affect other people's lives doing that. But, to a new parent doing this, once you get it, see if you can educate other people, because, one of the best ways to learn anything is to teach someone else how to do it. So, that's, you're going to be challenged. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? And if you don't know, don't lie. Just say, hey, I don't know about that yet. Maybe I'll go look at that and I'll get back to you. And there's plenty of resources online, including your own and Sandra's and, places like that, and forums and Facebook and all that. So, the big thing was educating other people. The key is not to get too defensive, because then it's like, I'm second guessing myself. Just, say, look, this is what we're doing. This works, and it's worked for several families for several years and probably decades now. So just go with that. And if someone's like actively challenging you, just try to see it from their point of view. There's some fear in there probably, because you're challenging a very core part of society that children are supposed to be in school. They're supposed to be, they're supposed to have rules that, govern every aspect of their lives. And that's unfortunately where we've gotten to. And so, these people brought up that way. They mean well. They want your kids, hopefully they want them good things for your kids. It's just that they themselves were brought up in a different way. And so, come from that point of view, empathize a little bit with them. At the same point, you don't have to give any ground on what you're doing. You just, this is how it works. Look, my daughter is so happy. Look, she's like jumping up and down. Look, come here. Let me show you this. That you can use examples like that if you want to. It's just, it depends on who it is. Obviously, if it's a relative, you might choose different examples than if it's a friend, neighbor, or whatever.
Yeah, I love that, especially the piece about the confidence. That's something that I found was really helpful, especially, in the first few years when first couple of years when it was still something that was super new to, extended family, and to go into, family gatherings or, holiday dinners, whatever, to have the confidence, as in, even if you don't know all about unschooling, especially like you mentioned at the beginning, you don't know the answers to all the questions. To me, to go in without having those questions in the air. I'm not sure if I'm saying that well. One thing I didn't do was ask questions when I was there, because like you said, they know the conventional way, right, of parenting and education and everything. And with our children's best interests at heart, they are coming from that perspective still. So, if I had questions about my kids, or even just, if you get caught up in, it's so typical to be complaining about kids, right? At these kinds of gatherings. A gathering of adults are always complaining about kids doing X, Y, and Z. And I was always very careful not to get sucked up into that, pulled into that, because the go-to answer for everybody is always, well, That's because your kids aren't in school. They should be in school, etc. So yeah, to have those great stories that you talked about. Oh, see how they like this, they do that. I would have those in the back of my mind to bring up in conversation that people had, but I was always very careful not to be negative at all. And to save my questions for unschooling groups, because that I would be getting answers from that perspective. Those would be useful answers to me, not ones that made me feel guilty or second guess myself, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's a huge piece for me. And that, because, you know, it's very typical and conventional to try and use guilt on us, right? To try and change our minds. And they're trying to protect us from something they see that we're doing that's strange, that's unconventional. They're worried for us about what might happen. So like you said, if you can put yourself in their shoes a little bit, you can see where they're coming from, but you also don't want to be put in a position where you're constantly feeling defensive and having to field negative kinds of questions. I love fielding questions when they're curious. You can feel the difference, can't you? When someone's curious to know, or where someone's trying to set a trap for you, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing is, you know, some people respond well to logic. So you can kind of, you know, set up a scenario of, you know, how would you feel if someone was telling you to do something, you know, like just as an adult, you know, how, you know, you have to finish your dinner. You know, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but I don't want to, I'm done. No, you have to finish it. You can't get up from this table until you finish it. How would you feel as an adult? And they're like, well, I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't listen to that. Exactly. So why do we treat our kids any differently?
That particular example, I know when the kids were younger, what I would do when the kids were finished, I would specifically, you know, excuse them before that came up. You know what I mean? So we'd be at like my parents' dinner table for holidays or whatever, and we'd had a very nice dinner, and I could see the kids were done and they were ready to get up, and I would excuse them because I knew that would be an expectation that was there from the other adults or from my parents. So I would do that for them, for my kids, and I'm doing it for my parents too, right? Because they're not going to second guess me there.
Right.
And they're like, they may certainly think like, why is she letting them down so early? The rest of us aren't finished, or, you know, we're supposed to sit around and have conversations for an hour after. Like, what little kid's going to sit there for that? Yeah, right. So I would anticipate the expectations that they would have around things. I would talk to my kids beforehand, and we would figure out plans. So you know, what way can we maneuver through this to help everybody feel as comfortable as possible anyway? And then, we would have those kind of conversations later and say, you know, when they asked me, oh, they got up awful early. Well, you know, they were done. How would you feel if, you know, you were told you had to stay there, etc.? So, it's really interesting. In the end, I found it fun just to try and manage and come up with creative ways that we could move through situations.
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me is, you know, that strikes me in what you're saying, but also in my own experience, is the reason that works with our kids is because they trust us. And they trust us because we have a relationship with them. They know that we're going to listen to them. And that, you know, listening to them doesn't mean that what they want is automatic, you know, that's what happens. It just means there's a discussion, just like there would between me and my wife. Sometimes, you know, my wife gets her way, sometimes I get my way. But ultimately, they're being heard and they're being listened to. So when you have situations where you need to, hey, you know, we're going to grandma and grandpa's house, you might like keep your language a little bit, you know, safe, public safe and all that. You know, that will be like, oh yeah, okay, fine, we'll do that. And you know, there's no struggling there. That's, I think, the big part of the struggles I had early on were because there wasn't a trust, because I was making them do things.
Yeah, it's huge. And I love that little point, like you pointing that out before they go over to grandma's house, right? Because what you're also doing there is protecting their relationship with their grandparent, right?
Yep.
You're helping them see the parameters and explaining, if they say, well, why? You're going to explain their perspective and why that bothers them. And it's still, like you said, it's still a choice. But when you have that trusting and open relationship with them, they know that you didn't say that to try and control their language. You said that because you gave them a piece of real information about the situation that they're going into. There's a big difference.
Yep.
But you need that trust and that relationship first for them to see that, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. And that was another point that you had mentioned earlier, was that it becomes about the relationship, right? We're replacing school at first, but it soon becomes, you realize it's really foundational in the relationship itself. And when you focus on the relationship, all the learning and all the other things just fall into place behind it, don't they?
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. As the working parent, are there things you and your wife do to help you stay connected with the kids?
Well, I'll talk about our kids, but anybody listening, it's every kid's different. Every kid has different needs, so take that into account when I'm saying. Both our kids are very independent, and both of them from early age. Now, my son very much is introspective, even though he is social at times. So he's got long periods where he just wants to be by himself. What I do with that is he has no problem with me walking into his room and watching him play a game, which I love doing because the way he plays and how good he is just fascinating for me. And the graphics that they have now that I didn't have as a kid.
I know.
There's things like that I do to let him know I'm still here. And, we say goodnight to him at night. So, it's not like we just completely ignore him. We invite him to eat with us. He sometimes does, sometimes doesn't. Now with my daughter, it's a little bit different. She has her friends she's talking to online, so she doesn't generally want to be interrupted if she's in the middle of a big game, although she has no problem with us watching her. But otherwise, she loves to share everything with us. So she'll come to us a lot of the time and say, hey, look at this, look what I'm doing. And then we'll go and look at that. Or other times, we'll just walk up to her or we'll ask her what she's up to, or, she will draw something and give it to us. It just depends on what she's doing. But we're always aware, of what's going on, even if we're not with her, 100% of the time. And she wouldn't want us there 100%, but probably, a decent amount at least. And so we try to as best we can. And she's understanding there's certain circumstances, like we're making dinner, we can't exactly be with her at the same time, things like that. But overall, I think, the way we're connected is we're there, they know we're there, and we talk to them, and it's not like something we think about. It's just kind of an automatic thing where we're just, okay, let me see what she's up to, or, let me ask her, hey, we're going to be doing this the next couple of days. Do you want to go to this? Just general life stuff just naturally causes us to connect to them. And that's pretty much how it works out.
It's just life, living together as people, right?
Exactly.
And I loved your point about how it's very individual. It is knowing each of our children as an individual person, not just like a group of children, right? That you have
right.
The same set of expectations or try to have the same kind of relationship with. Once you know them individually and you know the ways that work between both your personalities, right? To connect the ways that, and then you just keep that connection going. I love that.
Yeah. And the difference between the kids, it's kind of funny because we knew when my daughter was born, it's like, okay, we've got this. We've had one kid before, right? We know exactly what to do. And so went down the same attachment parenting path, and all that stuff worked, sure. But, my son was a very good sleeper as a baby, and that helped my wife a lot. Now, my daughter, not so much. She was very much into, I want to know everything that's going on. So my wife didn't get as much rest with her, but in other things too, there's obviously different personality types and so forth. So, though some things will work the same, there were so many more things to learn. And that's true in unschooling as well. What might have worked with my son, as far as being able to relate to each other in certain ways, might not work with my daughter, and vice versa. So, it's the key is treat each kid as an individual and go from there.
I love that point because it's true, right? The principles of attachment parenting, the principles of unschooling are the same, but the way it plays out on an individual basis with not only just within different unschooling families, but with each different child, right? It can look so different, even when it's all coming from the same foundation.
Right.
I love that. Well, that's why I enjoy interviewing so many different people about their unschooling lives, and each one looks so different. That's why I love talking about the kids and what they're into too, because it's fascinating to see all the different ways that unschooling weaves into people's lives. That's my thing. Yep. So what has surprised you most so far about how unschooling has unfolded in your lives?
Well, looking back, it's not surprising now, but at the time, I was, even though I was confident starting out, I wasn't quite sure how all this was going to work. Right? It's like, this is all uncharted territory. I'm not completely uncharted, but just, as we've moved along in time, there's more and more people unschooling. But at the beginning, and same for you, as you mentioned, there were very few people doing it, or it felt like there were a lot less than maybe there were, because, we weren't communicating as well as we are now through various social media and so forth. But I think the big surprise for me was, watching them grow and develop and all of these different, like my daughter asking me out of the blue, all these different things. And these, like the math problems I was talking about, but also her ability to take context in English. Our language is not one of the easiest ones to learn. And she's never been officially taught anything about English, reading, writing, nothing. Writing, she actually asked to learn how to write her letters, even though we're all typers. So, but she did that. But as far as reading goes, she did that because of all of her online, forums that she participated in, or the role playing, or whatever. And kids would correct her grammar along the way. So it's kind of neat how that all just organically worked. But I think that was one part of the surprise. The other was just her ability to put together concepts that I thought would take more, not that she would never be able to learn them, but it would be later on, or that it would be with, help from me or my wife. But there's just things that she comes up with, ideas, of what she wants to do, or looking at the world around her and correctly assessing it, and just stuff like that I didn't know that she would even be paying attention to. And I think that kind of surprised me.
That's such a fascinating piece, isn't it? Because we still have expectations on what we think kids can do, and we say, we realize the value of having a human relationship with them, right? Not a power-paced adult-child relationship. But yeah, when you see what they're capable of, just in thinking and making connect, not even just capable in the things that they can do, but in the thinking that they can do, and the creative connections and the way they can see the world, it just kind of blows your socks off, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. And the typical thing of most parents is to have this, golden path laid out for their kids, right? They're going to learn this, they're going to learn that, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And, there's all these things. And even as I talked about earlier, how they're dabbling in a bunch of different things, the big mistake, that I would get into here and there, and that I learned not to now, is, she's going to be, a fashion designer, whatever. And fortunately, I never opened my mouth and said anything to her about it. But the thoughts were there, and that can cause problems if you're not careful about it. So, the key is she's going to be a human being, and she's going to be a happy human being that knows how to learn. that's really all.
Yeah, and there you go. That's where the value is, right?
Right.
It's amazing. Well, speaking of our kids, have there been times when your kids' interests or choices have challenged your thinking or stretched your comfort zones? And if so, how did you work through those moments?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's not like, everything I've talked to up to this point, I might have painted this perfect rosy picture of perfect balance in a household. And, we have this tidy house that, it's not anything like that at all. And but it's not total chaos either. So, I mean, I don't want to paint a horrible picture, but the reality is somewhere in between. There's life is life, right? It's messy at times, and you have to kind of roll with it. And we as parents, how we handle these things, these going outside of our comfort zone, is something our kids are observing us do. So they're learning from us as we're doing this. So it's important that we do handle it well, or at least clean up after ourselves if we don't. Which is another point overall, being able to say, I'm sorry. And, I screwed up. I didn't want to behave that way towards you or whatever. But definitely, the triad of sex, drugs, and religion, right? So, the big key there for us was being able to have honest conversations with them, and for them to, understand that we're not just making this stuff up, that we truly believe what we're saying. And, things like sex, that wasn't actually that hard for us. We've always been about, this is, naming the body parts correctly, not giving them names and all that. But, the hard balance is, okay, yes, there's certain philosophies that we believe in that may not jive with the law, right? So we have to be careful about that and not break the law. So how do we do that? Well, it's a tough balance, and we discuss that with them. Religion, we're Jewish, but our kids decided, religion doesn't matter that much to us, and that actually wasn't a big deal for us. For someone else, it could be a big deal, though. You could be devout Christian, devout Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever, and you've got a kid that could care less and wants nothing to do with it. And the key there is, if you ever want a kid to join whatever you're doing, the best way to do that is to leave them alone, because if you try to make them do it, they're not going to want to, and later on they're going to rebel. That doesn't mean that they're going to join anyway. It could be that that's just their opinion, that's who they are, and that it's all about accepting them where they are. So, I mentioned religion. It's really not outside my comfort zone at all. I had no problem with them saying, look, I'm not really into this. I don't believe in God, or I do, or and that changes over time too. Maybe they do one time, they later on, well, I'm agnostic, or I do believe in God, or none of that really matters. It's their personal choice. So the big thing is, being able to, the big thing is having the relationship that we do allows for us to have these conversations when they hit boundaries for us. And, we can flat out say no, it's just as I would with my wife, can I come sit on your lap? No, I need my space right now. That's a reasonable thing to say. And so the same with our kids, it's not about letting them cross all of your boundaries and, go all over your comfort zones and you not saying anything. You talk about it, and there's compromise maybe, or maybe there's not. Maybe there's just something you can't compromise on, and that's that. And they understand that. And because you have the good relationship with them, because they trust you, that's not such a big deal. They can handle those no's. The key is saying yes as often as you can, so that when you do say no, number one, it means something, and number two, it's accepted pretty easily, actually.
Yeah, because from that relationship, they, when you've got that trust, you can have that conversation. You can explain your thinking, right? And it's a conversation that you're having. It's not an edict that you're passing down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I love that point that it all comes back to the relationship. And that is one of the big things, I think, because no matter what, we can have strong beliefs in certain things. I mean, like you were talking about religion and sex, and for some people, like it's food, maybe you're a staunch vegetarian for your lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
The challenge comes when you put that expectation on your child to follow, right? And what gets damaged is a relationship. So again, going back to that relationship to see, to understand that depending on your response, that's what's at stake. Right. Exactly. And it may be worth it to you. Like you said, you may have a no, or, this is my line, and this is where I feel I need to draw my line for my children. If that's something that you need to do, you need to understand that the effect of that is going to be what that effect is going to be on your relationship. So, trust is going to be diminished certainly for a while. If that's something that they still feel they need to explore, then they're going to need to do that behind your back, basically, because
Right.
they don't want to get in trouble, and they know that you're not going to be happy about it. So they're going to explore it on their own. So, that still may be something that's acceptable to you. And it's just knowing what your choice. You really can't have an expectation that you can literally control another person, right?
Exactly. Yep.
You, certainly not as they get older, right?
Oh, definitely not. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's fascinating, and I love that piece because it's the dance of our relationships. It's like how one thing that really helped me when I was stretching comfort zones was talking to them, right? Because so often our comfort zones are on rather conventional lines, just because we can't visit everything when we first come to unschooling, right?
Right.
Our comfort zones and our paradigms and the way we see things, they just are. And it's when they come up that we're like, oh, hold it, I'm getting uncomfortable here. And yeah, you're right. You don't want to ignore that uncomfortableness because you're losing depth in the relationship and damaging the relationship then as well, right? I think for me, the really important thing, though, was to do a lot of that work at first internally to really understand myself and why that line was there, and to understand where they were coming from. Because so often my stereotype and where they were coming up against that, they were coming from such a different perspective. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, I can see why you want to do that. And then things were great. And I didn't even really, they think so much. They've half the time addressed my concerns already that I don't even really have to say much, right?
Yeah, and the thing with when you're looking at your own boundaries and you're respecting yourself, that's something that you're teaching the kids at the same time. They're watching you do that. You're their model for what life is like as an adult. So if you're saying, oh, this doesn't work for me, that allows them to say the same thing as an adult.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Yeah, because they're seeing you think it through. They're seeing you process it. They're seeing you sharing your insight, your understanding, etc., and working through it with them. And absolutely, those are skills that every time you do that with them, they're gaining experience with doing it, right? And that's a skill that they take with them forever. That's why focusing on the relationship just brings it's lifelong skills, right? Not facts that they're learning.
Right. You're not filling their heads with information. You're showing them life as it unfolds live.
Exactly. Oh, I know. It's beautiful. Okay. Oh, and I'm just going to go back and say it again. Life is messy. I love that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's true. That's what it is. And we're living life together, and we're doing it as best we can in relationship with our family. So I love that. Okay, last question for you, Robert. As an unschooling dad, what piece of advice would you like to share with dads who are considering or just starting out on their unschooling journey?
Well, it depends on what kind of person you are as a father, as far as how you learn. That's something that's overlooked a lot of times. If it isn't the father, like in my case, coming to unschooling first, and it is the wife or partner, explaining to them what unschooling is. If first of all, this advice is for the partner to start with, be aware of what your husband's learning style is, and or your partner's learning style. The key there is, some people think, well, if you just read this, you'll get it. Well, some of us aren't readers. We don't learn that way. We learn kinesthetically, through experience or through discussion or other ways. So be open to that. And on the dad side of it, if you're getting stuff thrown at you, throw it back and say, this doesn't work for me this way. Give me a different way. But be open. Really be open to alternative ideas. And this stuff really does work. It's not like we all just decided to do something out of the blue. It doesn't do any good for the. It really. My overall goal is peace in the world. Right. That's something that I really care about, and I believe that by giving our kids this ability to live life as human beings and not being told what to do, they are more likely to be peaceful than not later on in life. They're more likely to be more empathetic and so forth. So as a dad, kind of look at that as a goal, what am I trying to affect in the world? That's one part. The other part is, as a dad, you have these ideas of what you want to impart in general, but instead of trying to impart directly, how about just living it and letting them observe you? And that's one part. As far as the unschooling piece goes, that's about the relationship. That's about saying, okay, these are human beings that are my loved ones. And what do I want to give to them? Well, I want to give to them, love, number one, but, that comes out in a peaceful way of just talking and not talking with them, not at them, listening to them first. Always listen first and really listen. Don't just listen for waiting for the pause to say something. Truly get what they're saying. And then move on. And I don't remember how Sandra put this, but read a little, learn a little, try a little, or something like that. I think is how she says it. So don't do what I did. Don't fire hose yourself. Do a little bit of time. If it means just letting go of their bedtime, or not worrying about subjects in school, or pick one thing to start with and do it with one thing at a time and see how it feels. Just try one thing. It's not like opening the floodgates. Allow one thing at a time, see how you feel, and also talk to other unschooling dads as you're moving along, because there's things that we've all been through. And I always offer myself on Facebook and all over the place, and hopefully I'll be able to give you something to put in the show notes about how to contact me. But I really encourage dads to talk to me or any other unschooling dad. I'm not the only one. And really say, oh, I'm going through this, and we can say, yeah, we've been through that. This is what happened. Or you might have a unique problem. Not every one of our problems have been covered necessarily. But just be open, read, learn, and move forward one step at a time. And this will come. And keep asking questions too. Don't just sit there and stew with it. Ask the questions. And you're not wrong for questioning this. You really care about your children, but be open.
I love that, Robert. So many great points in there. That was beautiful. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. And definitely, before we go, where is the best place for people to connect with you online if they have any questions?
I'd say Facebook, and that's really hard to find me that way. I guess, if you join Unschooling Connection, that's a group I'm an admin of, that basically the point of that group is to get people who are in the same geographic region to know that they're near each other. It's also, advice and things like that. I'm on that group. If you join that, I'll see you. And then obviously, if you see that I'm the admin, you can directly friend me. Let me think. I think my Twitter is @RC Gottlieb. And probably email is another way to do it. Though I don't know if I should do that on here.
No, I think between Twitter and Facebook, we should be able to help people get connected with you.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. And through, I guess, am I friends with you on Facebook? If I'm not, I will be. Then you can see me as a friend of Pam's, and just feel free to friend me and send me a message, though. Don't just friend me blindly, because I don't know who you are otherwise. So send me a message and say, hey, I'm a dad or a mom or whatever. It doesn't matter. I'll talk to anybody. And, I need help with unschooling. You can just keep it that simple, and I'll let you through.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thanks so much, Robert. Have a great day.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you found it helpful. You might also like the backlist episodes at livingjoyfully.ca/podcast. While you're there, be sure to pick up your free copy of my book, What is Unschooling? In it, we'll explore some of the common questions people have when they first hear about unschooling, like, how will my child learn? How do I know they're learning? What is deschooling? And how do I get started? It's also available at many online ebook retailers. And if you'd like to connect online, you can find me on Facebook at Living Joyfully. Until next time, have fun living and learning with your family.